Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead as he pushed his janitor's cart down the empty hallway of Lincoln Elementary. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows that seemed to mirror the weight he carried every single day. It was past midnight, and while the rest of the world slept peacefully, he scrubbed floors and emptied trash cans, his calloused hands working tirelessly to provide for the one person who mattered more than his own breath, his 8-year-old son, David. David hadn't spoken a word in 3 years, not since the car accident that took his mother's life and left him trapped in a silence so profound that doctors couldn't explain it. There was nothing physically wrong with his vocal cords, no brain damage, no medical reason for his muteness. The specialists called it selective mutism brought on by trauma, but Marcus called it heartbreak, a little boy's way of keeping his pain locked away where no one could touch it. Every night, Marcus would come home from his janitor job at 3 a.m. to find David curled up in bed, clutching the worn photograph of his mother, tears dried on his small cheeks. The boy would look up at his father with eyes that held oceans of unspoken words, and Marcus would sit beside him, stroking his hair, whispering stories about better days that felt like distant dreams. Money was tighter than a noose around Marcus's neck. The medical bills from David's treatments, the therapy sessions that seemed to lead nowhere, the basic necessities of raising a child, it all piled up like autumn leaves that no amount of sweeping could clear away. There were nights when Marcus sat at their small kitchen table, staring at unpaid bills, wondering if love alone was enough to save his son. That Tuesday night started like any other. Marcus was cleaning the music room when something caught his eye in the corner of a violin case, battered and forgotten, pushed behind a stack of outdated textbooks. The case was covered in dust, its leather worn thin from years of neglect. Something about its abandoned state tugged at his heart. Maybe it was because he recognized the look of something discarded, something that had once been precious but was now considered worthless. He opened the case carefully, his rough hands surprisingly gentle. Inside lay a violin with a crack running down its body like a lightning bolt frozen in amber. 3 of the 4 strings were snapped, dangling uselessly. The bow was missing half its horsehair. To anyone else, it would have been trash, but Marcus saw something different. He saw possibility. The next morning, as David sat at the breakfast table pushing cereal around his bowl in silence, Marcus placed the broken violin beside him. David's eyes widened at the first real emotion Marcus had seen from his son in months. The boy's small fingers reached out tentatively, tracing the crack in the wood as if he were reading Braille. "I found it at school," Marcus said softly, "thought maybe we could fix it together." David looked up at his father, and for a moment, Marcus thought he might speak. Instead, the boy nodded once, cradling the instrument against his chest like he'd found a lost friend. What happened next transformed their small apartment into something magical. Every evening after Marcus returned from work, father and son would sit together at the kitchen table, working on the violin by lamplight. Marcus researched repair techniques on the library's computer during his lunch breaks, printing out instructions that cost precious quarters. He learned about wood glue and varnish, about the delicate art of stringing an instrument. David watched everything with intense concentration, occasionally pointing to show his father where to apply the glue or how to position a clamp. It was the most engaged Marcus had seen his son since the accident. Though David still didn't speak, his eyes began to shine with something that had been missing, a hope. The repair took 3 months. Marcus worked double shifts when he could, saving every penny to buy proper strings and rose iron for the bow. He found replacement horsehair at a music shop across town, where the elderly owner, moved by their story, gave him a discount that brought tears to Marcus's eyes. When they finally finished, the violin looked beautiful despite its visible scars. The crack was still there, sealed but not hidden, like a reminder that broken things could be made whole again without erasing their history. Marcus had never expected David to actually play it. The violin was simply meant to be a project they could share, a way to spend time together. But the morning after they completed the repairs, Marcus woke to find David's bed empty. Panic shot through him until he heard a single, pure note floating through their small apartment like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. He found David in the living room, the violin tucked under his chin, bow poised with perfect form. Marcus held his breath as his son began to play, and what emerged was nothing short of miraculous. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, filled with a sorrow so deep it seemed to come from the earth itself, yet threaded through with threads of hope that made Marcus's heart soar and break simultaneously. David had never taken a lesson, never shown any interest in music before the accident. Yet he played with the skill of someone who had been born with music in their bones. The broken violin sang in his small hands, its repaired voice carrying all the words David couldn't say. As the final note faded, David lowered the violin and looked at his father with tears streaming down his face. Then, in a voice rusty from 3 years of silence, he whispered, "I remember her singing." Marcus fell to his knees, pulling his son into his arms as they both sighed tears of grief, of relief, of a love so powerful it had found a way to heal what seemed permanently broken. In that moment, Marcus understood that the violin hadn't just been repaired, they both had been. Word spread quickly through their small community about the miracle in apartment 4B. Mrs. Henderson from downstairs, who had always complained about noise, now asked if David might play for her lonely evenings. The mailman lingered on his route just to catch a few notes drifting through their window. Soon, people were gathering in the courtyard below their apartment, drawn by music that seemed to speak directly to their souls. A local news reporter heard about the 8-year-old boy who had broken his silence through a broken violin, and soon their story was being shared across the country. But Marcus didn't care about the attention. What mattered was the sound of his son's laughter, the conversations they now shared over breakfast, the way David's eyes sparkled when he talked about the music he heard in his head. The violin had taught them both that broken doesn't mean worthless, that with enough love and patience, even the most damaged things can create something beautiful. Sometimes the cracks are what let the light in, and sometimes the most profound healing happens not when we're made perfect again, but when we learn to make music with our scars. As Marcus watched his son play that night, surrounded by neighbors who had become family, he realized that love via patient, persistent, unwavering love via truly was enough. It was enough to fix violins and heal hearts, to bring voices back from silence and transform janitors into heroes. In the end, the most beautiful music comes not from perfect instruments, but from broken ones that refuse to stop singing.